What if Ahsoka was the chosen one? The Jedi Order was still trying to select Anakin Skywalker as per the last wishes of Qui-Gon Jinn. There are those that didn't believe him to be the chosen one from the prophecy, even with his astronomically high midichlorian count, and some didn't believe in the prophecy altogether. Jedi Master Plo Koon did believe in the prophecy and supported the young Skywalker, but he wasn't sure if it was in his or the Order's best interest for him to be the chosen one. He had little say in the matter though, so he didn't give it much thought after Skywalker's acceptance of the Order. But it came to mind as he sensed a powerful presence in the Force akin to what he had felt from the boy. He had only planned to stop him by shielding to refuel his ship, but he found himself drawn to his presence and started searching for it. Once refueled, he flew over Shilly's vast forests and grasslands, both feeling and looking for this presence that called to him. By chance, he happened upon an outlying village built deep into Shilly's wilderness. It was there they found the source of the strong presence. He had been expecting an older child young adult by how powerful it was, but instead he found himself looking down at a 4-year-old who grew to girl. Her mother held her protectively in her arms, but he could see sadness in her eyes. The village chief told him an incident a year before where the young girl attempted to rapture. Her mother had decided not to contact the Jedi, not wanting to part with her child, but during the past year, she had proven difficult to handle. They knew how to raise a Force-sensitive child, but not one this strong. Plo Koon reassured the mother that she would be safe and well taken care of as a Jedi, even admitting that she could leave the Order if it didn't fit her. Before anything though, he needed to check her midichlorian count to see if it was above the desired level. The mother hesitantly let him carefully grab the young girl's arm. The girl didn't squirm or shrink back from him. She instead stared at him with big eyes that were full of curiosity. Once he had a blood sample, he told them he would come back the next day with the results, and went back to the ship to test her blood. While the system tested it, he contacted Master Windu, informing him that he had been sidetracked, and wouldn't be able to continue his mission. He had been sent out to observe the situation out of Rim after all, not to pick up a youngling, but he hadn't been able to ignore the call. Master Windu assured him that he would send someone else, understanding that if Plo Koon thought it was important, then it likely was. Ending the communication, Plo Koon looked back at the midichlorian test and did a double take. He tested it once more, then again after that until all the blood they had was used. The results stayed the same. The child's midichlorian count was over 32,000. Skywalker's midichlorian count had already been the highest in the Jedi Order's history at 27,000, at least since they started recording that kind of thing. But this green child's midichlorian count was higher than even his. He spent the rest of the evening researching the chosen one prophecy, at least what he had access to away from the temple. He hadn't been able to get out of his mind since he first thought of it over the planet, and wondered if it was part of the Force. The prophecy was vague and prone to interpretation as all prophecies were, but it clearly said that the chosen one would become one of the strongest Force sensitives in the galaxy. He couldn't deny that this child he had stumbled upon now officially had the strongest potential in the Force. Plo Koon also noted the fact that there hadn't been a father with the mother, another stipulation of the prophecy. Perhaps he could just be absent, but if there truly wasn't a father, then it was unnerving how similar Skywalkers in this child's situations were. Returning to the village the next morning, it was the first thing he asked. Though the villagers told him that the father was from another community, the mother nervously confessed that there was indeed no father, but she had been too scared to admit it. Plo Koon was also honest with her, talking about how her daughter had the most midichlorians in recorded history, and that she had the potential to become a great Jedi. The mother was hesitant, but with this fact, she knew that she couldn't raise her daughter properly, and give her as good a life as a Jedi could. Before she handed her over though, she made Plo Koon promise to tell the girl about her when she was old enough. With a final goodbye, kiss her on the forehead, she parted with her daughter, tears streaking down her orange cheek. The girl, whose name he was told to be Ahsoka Tano, curiously watched her mother before she struggled to go back to her. Plo Koon held her gently and tried to distract her as he walked to his ship. Ahsoka didn't resist too much, but he could tell that she was sad and scared about how it affected her presence in the Force. However, she still had that curious gleam in her eyes. It was something that would help her get accustomed to her new life. He continued to hold Ahsoka as they flew straight back to Coruscant, which didn't take long since Chile was only a few jumps away. Once there, landing in the temple hangar, he carried her to the High Council chambers. There were only a few members there, but the two he was looking for were among them, Grand Master Yoda and Master of the Order Mace Windu. As soon as he walked in, all the members shifted their attention to him and the girl he held in his arms. He explained everything, along with his belief that Ahsoka could be the chosen one instead of Skywalker. Grand Master Yoda paused the conversation there, instead of calling an emergency council meeting. Since the child was within the age range though, she was already accepted to the order. So, while the council members gathered, Plo Koon took Ahsoka to the creche where he left her in the care of the guardians there. Taking one last look back at her sad face before he left, he resolved to visit as often as he could. The council meeting was a mess. There were talks of kicking Skywalker out of the order, of isolating, testing, and monitoring both of them, or to send them both to the service corps where they couldn't be a threat. These notions were thankfully shot down, and Grandmaster Yoda advised that they don't think of the prophecy while they make a decision. This led to the prophecy being mostly disregarded as something to listen to, though unofficially, Ahsoka Tano was agreed to be the chosen one, unless proven otherwise. Though it was unprecedented, Anakin Skywalker had been accepted per the dying wish of Qui-Gon Jinn, so he would remain in the Order. Both individuals were to be treated like any other member of the Order. With the decision finalized and the meeting ended, Plo Koon hurried back to the creche. Upon arrival, he unfortunately found that Ahsoka was already by herself, away from the other children. Her face lit up when she saw him though, and she made her way to him. He found himself calling her Little Ahsoka from then on, remembering that's how her mother affectionately called her. Time passed and it wasn't uncommon to find Plo Koon and Ahsoka together. Though she was being taken care of and taught by the guardians of the creche, Plo Koon also took upon himself to teach her a few things. She hadn't been able to make any friends, or even get close to anyone, even after she was put in a clan, but it didn't matter as long as she had Plo. As the years went by, she made astounding progress in her classes, and showed a surprising amount of control in the Force. She was ahead of her peers, but this only further ostracized her from them. It worried Plo Koon that she wasn't making connections, but after seeing that she was trying, he decided not to bring it up with her. It wasn't her fault. Even though she was ahead of them, she stayed with her clanmates. Though to encourage her, Plo Koon taught her more advanced things when they were together. He only did this if she finished everything that was originally assigned for her to do that day, to the satisfaction of the instructors. Ahsoka often did this because it meant that she could spend more time with Plo. It was after she had turned 9 that she first met the original Chosen One. Anakin wasn't with Obi-Wan like he often was, and Ahsoka found him in the hallway near the training hall, where she had been secretly watching some Jedi spar. She immediately tried to strike up a conversation with him, something that had become a basic agreeing for her in an attempt to make friends. She didn't particularly want to make friends. Instead, it was to try to ease Plo's worry about her being alone. She had heard rumors Anakin were clanmates, and Plo had told her to keep her distance from him, but this just made her more curious. Anakin didn't take too kindly to her trying to talk with him, and opted to ignore her. A few of his friends came out of the training hall a moment later, giving him an opportunity to escape. He didn't hate Ahsoka, at least not anymore. When he had first been told that he wasn't the chosen one anymore, he was devastated and filled with fury. The council hadn't even believed in the prophecy, and now they got another chosen one? These feelings quickly subsided though as, without the weighty title of the chosen one, people gradually became more friendly towards him and started approaching him. This soon led to making several friends, who he enjoyed sparring with, and showing off his Force abilities too. There were still those that bullied him, but it was overall better now. He was still jealous of the special treatment and attention Ahsoka got, but she could keep the Chosen One title. It was something they didn't want to get involved with anymore. Ahsoka wasn't put off by his coldness, it being something she was used to. Instead, she hurried back to her clan before her absence could be noticed. Perhaps it was because of her, but the next year, her clan were on the gathering. They were on the younger end, definitely not the youngest individuals, but the youngest group to go in centuries. Ahsoka was beyond excited. This was the first time she had left the Jedi Temple, much less Coruscant. It didn't feel like she belonged there, surrounded by Durocrete. The only place where she felt peace was in a room of thousand fountains, or at the base of the great tree. She remembered little before she came to the temple, but she did remember the lush, green vegetation. She had looked at the planet she had come from, Chile, or at least records of it in the temple's library, and she always felt a connection to it. Though she had been told that the place they were going to is a frozen planet, and she was wearing the heaviest clothes in anticipation, she was still eager to at least be away from the endless sight of buildings. When they got to Ilum, it was indeed freezing, and Ahsoka almost immediately wanted to leave. But she soon as said found herself enjoying the natural beauty of it, to the point where she didn't pay attention to anything Grandmaster Yoda said. She was the last in the Crystal Caves, and she quickly separated herself from her clanmates, who seemed eager to stick together. Ahsoka kept her eyes out for her kyber crystal, but she also enjoyed running her hand over the rough stone. She was so distracted that when she paused, she realized that she didn't know where she was. Chest tightening, she attempted to backtrack, but nothing was familiar to her, and there was too many branching paths. The calmness she had been clinging to vanished in an instant, and she sank to the ground, tears beginning to fall, breathing rapidly and heartbeat erratic. She wasn't close to anyone that had come with her. Plo wasn't even back in Coruscant, so was there anyone else that would come for her, or would she be left here? Would Plo even come for her, or would she be abandoned again as her family already done? The cold and silence were heavy around her, disrupted only by the constant puffs of hot air coming from her mouth, and her heartbeat that seemed to echo down the halls at times. Whenever she opened her eyes, the grey darkness always greeted her, so she tried to keep her eyes squeezed shut. When she happened to open them again though, she realized that it actually wasn't that dark. There was a soft glow coming from the walls. As she got fascinated by this, something that Plo had told her came to mind. His voice echoed in her head, telling her a Jedi was never alone and never defenseless. They always had the Force. Gingerly, she reached out a shaking hand and felt around with the Force like Plo had taught her. After a moment, she felt a gentle tug, but it took another moment before she convinced her to follow it. As she walked, her breathing calmed and her heart steadied, though it still pounded. The pull in the Force only seemed to lead her deeper into the caves, but she fought the fear down, reasoning that perhaps it was leading her to another exit. Time blurred along the space around her until she found herself in a large cavern, in the center of which was a pillar of stone. Glimmering from the stone drew Ahsoka forward, and she nervously approached. Subconsciously, when it was within reach, she reached out and grabbed the shining, glass-like object. Now that it was resting in her palm, she realized that this must be a kyber crystal. It was rather larger than she had thought it would be, and if she began examining it more closely, enamored with the shape and size. However, as she rubbed it between her fingers, it broke in half. Ahsoka's breath caught and panic filled her. Did she just break her kyber crystal? No, how could she do that? It's a crystal. She had only been touching it. Still worried, she quickly and gently placed both pieces inside her glove before placing that inside her pocket, crushing it with her now bare hand. As she turned around, anxiety raced through her again. She had followed the pull in the Force, believing that it would guide her out, not to her kyber crystal. How was she going to find her way out? Though terrified, she attempted to reach out with the Force again, and thankfully found herself being guided by it once more. It took effort to stay calm. The fear that she would be abandoned was still fresh in her mind, but the thought that she had found her kyber crystal emboldened her. There was a lingering thought though. It felt like hours had passed. Were the others still waiting for her, or had they already left? Ahsoka only realized she had been anxiously holding her breath as she found herself exiting the deeper parts of the cave and into the smooth halls and archways that marked the entrance. As she turned the last corner, she saw that ice was already covering almost the entire entrance again, so she started running until she was past it. Relief almost took all the strength from her as she saw several of the clanmates waiting outside. After a quick head count, she was thankful that she wasn't the last one out, but it also made her wonder, had they been waiting for her or the other youngling? Grandmaster Yoda came up to her, interrupting these thoughts, and asked if she had found a kyber crystal. Ahsoka pulled out her glove and started to shake out the contents, but hesitated. Making a split-second decision, she only let a single shard of the kyber crystal fall into her open palm. She still wasn't sure if she had broken it, or if she should have 2 kyber crystals, but she felt that she should keep the second one a secret, at least for now. Grandmaster Yoda nodded his approval and gave her words of praise before going to her other academy who had just exited the caves. They boarded the crucible again, where they finally met Master Hu Ying. He boasted about all the lightsabers the young Jedi had seen, getting everyone excited before giving them instructions on how to build the lightsabers. After giving them all the necessary parts, he told them to start trying to build the lightsabers. As they got to work, Master Hu Ying moved between them, offering advice and words of inspiration. Ahsoka barely touched the parts in front of her at first. Now that she had a chance, she had been gazing at one of her kyber crystals. She was enamored by it. It felt cold, but also had heat radiating through it, and there were no sharp edges. Instead, it was smooth with defined lines and points. It shone with an ethereal light, and it already felt like it was somehow a part of her, like an extension of her presence. When Master Ying came around her, she made a show of sorting the pieces in front of her, organizing them in a way that felt natural. Master Ying just chuckled and told her that she could take apart a lightsaber any time she wanted. But first, she had to know how to put it together, and she would only be given instructions on how to do that here. Embarrassed, Ahsoka started attempting to build a lightsaber, while the other younglings constantly cast nervous glances at those around them. Ahsoka just focused on what she was doing. She already knew that she was better than them, though Plo always told her not to let it go to her head. Instead of just thinking it, this one time she figured that she would prove it. Ahsoka started meditating like Plo taught her, even though she barely remembered anything about what he had told her. Those had been her least favorite of his lessons. Now slightly regretting that, she shifted the broader focus that the meditation usually entailed directly to the metal piece in front of her and the kyber crystal that still glowed warmly in her palm. She wasn't sure what guided her, but she started piecing together the lightsaber, each part finding its home amongst the rest like they were being drawn together. Instead of rushing through it, she found herself taking her time, marveling how each piece fits together perfectly and how intricate and complicated lightsaber truly was. There were a few times when she felt that something wasn't right, resulting in her moving things around till it did. By the time everything felt right, Ahsoka was the second one to complete her lightsaber, which slightly disappointed her. She had wanted to show that she was better than her clanmates, and she cursed herself for taking her time. Some spare parts scattered on the table distracted her from this thought, giving her an idea. After casting a glance around to make sure no one was paying attention to her, she gathered the parts and started tinkering with them. A shabby necklace soon lay in her hands. A necklace had a compartment that was just big enough for her other kyber crystal. Though it was crude, it would work, and Ahsoka quickly retrieved her other crystal from her glove, sliding into the compartment before promptly putting the necklace around her neck and tucking it into her shirt. Master Ying startled her as he spoke over her shoulder, congratulating her about completing her lightsaber, and asked to see it. She handed it to him, and, after examining it, he praised her, telling her that she had done it correctly, and that she must be a true prodigy. This swelled her with pride as he handed her lightsaber back to her, urging her to ignite it, and she complied. A green-yellow beam of light greeted her, and she took a moment to gaze at it before deigniting it. The body of the lightsaber was slightly different from others she had seen, with a slight curve to it and more streamlined, but the rest appeared to be the same. Master Ying offered her a clip, and she used it to attach her new lightsaber to her belt. Ahsoka stayed there for the rest of the trip back to Coruscant. The return trip took longer than before because most of the rest of her clan were having trouble building the lightsabers. She, on the other hand, was having a hard time not fiddling with her second kyber crystal, regretting that she listened to Master Ying instead of continuing to examine the crystal. The necklace she had made was slightly uncomfortable against her skin, but the pull of the kyber crystal was what kept attracting her touch whenever she wasn't thinking. It was difficult to keep still, and she was constantly on edge. She had thought the temple had been suffocating, but being confined in a ship for a long duration with people who didn't seem to care about her was worse, especially after the taste of freedom she had just experienced in Ilum. When they finally got back, Ahsoka immediately ran off, much to the ire of her instructors. Having sensed that Plo still wasn't there, she went to the Room of Thousand Fountains and hid from everyone for the rest of the day. She took this opportunity to both calm down from what she had experienced in the caves, and to finally study the second half of the kyber crystal. This one didn't appear to have been broken as well, There are no jagged edges, and the other one had fit perfectly inside the lightsaber. So is this a second, separate crystal? But should she have 2 crystals? She couldn't think of a single Jedi that did, not even any of the masters she had met. Unsure, she resolved to keep it a secret. When she had calmed down enough, she went back to her dorm room with her clan. Most of them were already there, and they ignored her as she came in like they usually did. But it kind of hurt this time. The next day, she was reprimanded for her behavior the day before, but she didn't care. Still, she had to catch up on what was taught to her clanmates while she was gone, on top of the day's lesson. Even though Plo was still gone, she fervently finished everything, half expecting to have the rest of the day to herself. However, another person came to give her advanced teachings. It was the first fellow Togruta she had seen, and she introduced herself as Master Shaak Ti. It was the first time Ahsoka was excited to learn something that wasn't from Plo. She usually just half listened in class anyway. It was with Master T that she started to learn how to wield a lightsaber. It was by the request of Plo, who believed that she would learn better from some of her own species. Over the next few weeks, Master T started by showing Ahsoka the stars of how to wield a lightsaber, then moved on, teaching her the basics of every lightsaber form. They skipped Form 1, since she was learning that from Grandmaster Yoda with her clanmates. Master Chi also emphasized Forms 2 and 4. They are the forms that she herself specialized in. She also told Ahsoka that if she was truly the Chosen One, that meant they were a Sith, and learning Makashi, a form purpose-built for lightsaber combat, would help in bringing balance. Being able to learn these more advanced lightsaber forms caused further friction with her clanmates, especially as she outperformed them. Unlike before though, it was starting to affect her, however much she hated to admit it. However, this became the least of her worries when Plo finally returned. He told her that she had made an impression during and since the gathering, and after some discussion, they believed it was finally time for her to become a Padawan. He was curious how she felt about undergoing the initiate trials. Before Plo could even finish talking, Ahsoka readily agreed to undergo the initiate trials. The thought of becoming a Padawan excited her, especially if she could be apprenticed to Plo. Plo soon relayed her acceptance, and preparations for her trial started, though she continued taking classes with her clanmates until then. The morning when her trials were ready, a Zabrak that she didn't recognize led her to a room near the base of the central tower. Inside were several more individuals, some of which she recognized were members of the High Council, but sadly, Plo wasn't there. The Jedi that had brought her there sat down at the table in the center of the room and motioned for her to sit across from him, which she did. From there, he asked her to tell him about the Jedi Code. She did so, but he frequently interrupted her, asking what she believed certain parts mean, or how one would carry out other parts of the code. Ahsoka believed most of the Jedi Code, but there are segments that she found difficult to acknowledge. This was primarily because she felt that she should feel positive emotions, and the fact that she had no control of when she felt negative emotions. Though she found these parts of the code hard to accept, she suspected that she mostly knew what the Jedi wanted to hear. Her assumptions proved correct after a lengthy discussion when she was informed that she had passed the first trial. Another individual that she also didn't know, this time a Twi'lek, walked towards her from the group that had been watching her. She told Ahsoka to follow her, and as she did, most of the other Jedi trailed behind them. They arrived at the training halls where she followed the Twi'lek to the center of the room, leaving the rest to watch from the wall. 2 training sabers were thrown to them, and Ahsoka readied herself for the only thing this could mean. However, before anything could start, the Twi'lek approached and handed Ahsoka a blindfold, telling her that once she put it on, the test would begin. Though nervous, she complied. Being a Togruta, she was better suited for this than most others. Togrutas could partially sense things around them using their montrals to echolocate after all. Ahsoka both felt and sensed the Twi'lek move, and she moved to counter. They clashed several times. But, like the first trial, Ahsoka was trying to figure out what they were testing. She doubted as if she could hold her own. Nobody would expect that from her. At least she hoped. She was barely staying in the fight to begin with, and it was all because she was relying on pure instinct and spontaneous movements. A thought struck her then, and following it, she switched from erratic moves of instinct to a genuine lightsaber form, to Makashi. The fight got a bit easier, almost as if her opponent's strikes were encouraging the proper use of this form. Then things instantly fell apart as her moves instead started countering Makashi, throwing Ahsoka on the back foot again. Panicking, she switched to Ataru. It was the last form she was confident in besides Form 1, and Ahsoka prayed that this would be enough. Thankfully, after a few more clashes in a similar manner to before, the Twi'lek stopped the duel and told her to take the blindfold off. When she did, she was congratulated, being informed that she had passed the second trial. Excitement coursed through her, replacing any worry that she had. This not only seemed relatively easy, but it was also surprisingly fun. Ahsoka was then guided to the Room of 1,000 Fountains, where she saw a graying human meditating. She was told to sit across from him and join him in meditation, which she did for what felt like an eternity. The excitement from before quickly vanished during it, replaced by boredom and restlessness. This was by far the thing she disliked most about life as a Jedi. When he started speaking, she nearly had a cry of joy. He had her do a few exercises in the Force, from lifting objects, taming a bird, and other, more intricate exercises using solely the Force. They were all easy for her, though annoying to keep doing them. What often kept her entertained during classes was playing around with things using the Force. Connecting with the occasional bird was the best as it felt more natural and was easier to do. This trial was now one of the funnest things she had been allowed to do, since using the Force without needing to was often frowned upon. It was kind of disheartening when he smiled and nodded, praising her for her control of the Force, but she knew that she had passed again. A master came up to her a moment later, telling her that she was ready to move on to the next part of Jedi training. But first, she would need to participate in the Apprentice tournament that would soon take place. From there, if she gained the attention of someone who wanted to be her master, she would become a Padawan. Otherwise, she would be assigned to the service corps at the discretion of the council reassignment. Ahsoka didn't let the last thing she said get to her. Chloe would become her master anyway. Even after she was guided back to the creche, she couldn't stop thinking about the future. She was nearly a Padawan, and she wasn't even 11 years old. Thinking back, and not wanting to disappoint Plo, while she waited for the Apprentice tournament, she finally began to take her studies seriously. Even this was second to how much she trained with the lightsaber, usually alone, but sometimes with someone she managed to convince to duel her. Before she knew it, the day of the annual Apprentice tournament arrived. For this, she was led to the combat training chamber, where over 30 other younglings ended up gathering. They were each given a training saber, and told that victory would only be achieved when they struck their opponent 3 times with said saber. One by one, they were paired and sent into the center of the bowl-shaped arena, leaving the other younglings to watch. As time passed, Ahsoka grew nervous. All of these younglings appeared to be older than her, and obviously knew more than her. Some also blatantly fought dirty, which was surprisingly mostly allowed. When her turn finally came, Ahsoka was trying to keep her confidence. She only knew the basics of all of the forms besides 2 and 4, and she wasn't proficient even those. As she made her way into the arena, she was thinking of ways to use the Force to win the duels. That was her only advantage against the other younglings. Her opponent was a human boy who was rather well built. He sneered at her as she came to face him, clearly looking down on her. She was half his size, to be fair. As the duel started, Ahsoka relied on Ataru, knowing that she wouldn't be able to compete with his strength. She also pushed him around the Force, which definitely angered him. Carefully and patiently, she was able to land 3 strikes on him, while he only managed to land 1 on her. He had made it count though, putting enough force behind it that there was already a bruised form in his testament. His face hardened as she was declared the victor, and she was relieved when he stormed off without further confrontation. She was able to relax and rest her bruised side as she watched the rest of the duels. Afterwards, they were sent to get something to eat before they reconvened their second round. As they returned to the training chamber, Ahsoka saw that several obstacles, balance beams, and swings were now in the arena. Everyone was here again, but only the victors from the previous duels were matched this time. If one had thought the first round had been difficult, then this was unimaginable. The first pair fought in the dark, the second in the rain, the third in scorched heat, all while they had to navigate the arena that had become linear and full of distractions. Ahsoka was in the 4th bout taking place, and this time she was against a female Mikian. Ahsoka tensed as she entered the arena, waiting in anticipation for what they would inevitably have to contend with. A yelp still escaped her as she was suddenly floating along with her opponent and everything else in the arena. There was no longer any gravity. How had they even done this? This distraction left her open and unable to block the Mikian's first strike, though she threw her away with the force before she could get in another. They bounced around the arena after that, launching off the floating objects towards each other in an attempt to get in a hit. Ahsoka managed to hit the Mikian's foot, but after that, they couldn't seem to do anything to the other, too hesitated to get close enough or to stop moving. Frustrated and reaching the end of her patience, Ahsoka used the force to throw herself at the Mikian. Her eyes wide and she raised her training saber to block, but Ahsoka instead grabbed it. Though she figured it would count as a hit against her, this allowed her to get in several quick strikes. Before she could worry if this was even allowed, they fell to the ground as gravity was re-established, and relief coursed through her when she was announced the victor. The Mikian congratulated her, introducing herself as Reva, and they talked a bit more afterwards while the rest of the duels happened. They had to part ways though, as the winners of the second part of the trial were separated from the rest, though as they were leaving, Ahsoka noticed that more duels were commencing with the ones who had lost in the first round. The 8 younglings that had won the second round, including her, were left with their device for the rest of the day before they were led to a separate group sleeping area for the night. Sometime in the dead of night, a Jedi burst into training sabers. They shouted this was the final match, waking everyone up while they threw the sabers into the center of the room. Most of the younglings scrambled to training sabers, but Ahsoka stayed away, still groggy and trying to understand what was happening. How could this be the final fight? Perhaps as to be expected though. From what she understood, these fights were not just testing their abilities, but also how they would react in adapted situations. Ahsoka stayed out of the scuffle initially, using her small size in the force to keep away. Hardly anyone paid attention to her, likely due to her seemingly non-threatening appearance. However, as soon as the youngling unintentionally backed into her with a training saber in hand, she snatched it from him, knocking him out of the competition in the process. Believing that doing nothing would be the equivalent of getting disqualified, she now charged into the melee that was taking place in the center of the room. It was brutal, to the point where she wondered why the Jedi observing didn't interfere. Fists and random objects were used instead of training sabers, with several others grappling on the floor. Ahsoka targeted the ones with training sabers first. They were the only ones that could disqualify anyone, and thus the only real threat. Only a human girl posed a real challenge against her, forcing her to use a Makashi against her. By the time she knocked them out, Ahsoka had already been struck twice, which made her more cautious. Thankfully, the rest were either too tired or distracted to react before it was too late, and she mostly simply struck them 3 times while they fought with each other. The last 2 realized it so, and attempted to get a saber, one managing it. She disqualified the unlucky one that didn't, but the exhaustion was weighing on her. Just as she landed the 3rd hit on the fortunate one, he also landed a hit on her, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Healers rushed in, signaling the end of the fight, treating them before they were all moved to another sleeping area where they were told to get some actual sleep. The Pantoran Jedi that said this smirked and added that this time it was real, and they wouldn't be disturbed until morning. So couldn't even question this as she collapsed into one of the beds, asleep as soon as she closed her eyes. The next day, many of the younglings had Jedi Masters and Knights come to them, seeing if they would like to become their apprentice. They, of course, all accepted. Even as the day dragged on though, nobody came to her. She only wanted Plo to be her master, so this was fine. But why hadn't he come for her yet? The answer came when he finally did arrive. Because of how close he was with her, the Jedi High Council had forbidden him from taking her as an apprentice. There are still many others that are interested in being her master, but because of this, the council was unsure of how to proceed. They were tempted to let her choose amongst the ones that were interested in her, but they were unsure if it was wise if she really was a chosen one. Ahsoka found it frustrating. The council refused to give her any benefits for being the chosen one, but they were also controlling her life like she was a chosen one. They just need to make up their minds. Since there was nothing she could do, she was forced to return to the creche with her previous clanmates until they made a decision. Thankfully, she was exempt from classes since she had passed trials, so Plo began freely teaching her anything he felt like, as if she were his apprentice. Master T also made appearances, mentoring Ahsoka when Plo was gone. It took several weeks for the council to finally reach a decision. It was enough time that the Council reassignment had gone involved, wondering if they should take responsibility for her. Her continued staying in their previous clan sleeping area had also drawn attention, and their previous clanmates seemed to now openly despise her after proving that she was better than them. This could finally end though, as Ahsoka heard their decision when Plo and Master T came to find her. Though many were hesitant, it was decided that Master Shock T would be taking her as an apprentice. Ahsoka was ecstatic as Master T, the only other one she would have wanted to be her master if not Plo. They hoped Ahsoka moved to a new accommodation in the Padawan living area before they went to the Master T's room in the Master's area. There, Master T pulled out a box, inside of which were cords and beads. Master T explained, telling Ahsoka that these are Silka beads, and they're now going to make her Padawan braid. It was more enjoyable than Ahsoka thought it would be, and they spent the rest of the day making a complete head decoration for her along with her Padawan braid. The next day, her official first day of becoming a Padawan started early and consisted entirely of testing and training. Though Master T had been there for the majority of her lightsaber learning, she didn't know how Ahsoka fared in any other aspect. So, she tested her, finding the gaps in her knowledge and skills. Several days of this followed, and Ahsoka began to dread each new day. Thankfully, after just over a week, Master T was satisfied, and to reward Ahsoka, she took her on a tour of the Senate district on Coruscant, where she was able to meet several politicians, senators, and many other people. The Chancellor of the Republic also approached her, striking up a conversation and asking about her. Though she figured he was being nice, she didn't have a good feeling around him, and her master appeared wary as well, politely excusing himself before leading Ahsoka away. Another few weeks passed before Master T finally took her off Coruscant. Ahsoka had thus far kept her second kyber crystal, which was still in the necklace, hidden in her room, but she was wary of leaving it there while she was gone. It was uncomfortable to wear, but she slipped it on before she left. They stayed mostly in the core to mid-rim, only occasionally going into the outer rim. Her master made sure that these outings didn't interfere with the training, and Ahsoka was often more tired during these than she had the first week, but she preferred this. She enjoyed being away from the temple and immersed in nature. She also met a wide variety of people and species, and whenever the opportunity presented itself, she tried talking with them. Master T mostly allowed this, enabling her curiosity and seeming to enjoy every minute of it. She also tried to duel with Ahsoka whenever she asked as well. It was practically the only training Ahsoka enjoyed, and her master was happy to comply. During one of these bouts, one which was more about burning energy than learning, the necklace came out from under her shirt. Master T immediately inquired about it, fortunately more curious than angry, and though Ahsoka wanted to continue to hide it, she knew that she couldn't anymore. Hesitantly, she took it off and opened the compartment, letting the kyber crystal fall into her palm. She had often enjoyed looking at it, and had practically memorized its shape entirely, but now guilt and worry replaced that wonder. Was she supposed to have it, and would Master T take it from her? Master T asked for an explanation, and Ahsoka complied, telling her everything about how it had separated, and how she felt that she should hide it. Master T simply nodded, a warm smile spreading across her face as she reassured Ahsoka, telling her that though having two kyber crystals wasn't common, it wasn't unheard of or against the rules. Though it was unusual to have one as a decoration, she would allow it, but she urged Ahsoka to think about building a second lightsaber. It was why they got kyber crystals in the first place, and if the Force gave her two, then it likely meant that she should have two lightsabers. Ahsoka, relieved, agreed to think about building a second lightsaber, not even knowing that had been an option. The next morning, Master T sat her down and handed her an actual necklace, or rather a pendant with a locket, one that she had just bought at the nearby town. Ahsoka's eyes watered as she thanked her master and transferred the kyber crystals to the locket. Not including the silk beads, this was the first physical gift she had been given. It only took a month before she built her second lightsaber, a shoulder that was recommended for dual wielding, though she still wore a new necklace. The shoulder was the same color and design as her first one, albeit a little shorter. Master T did her best to train her how to dual wield most effectively, but when they were at the temple on Coruscant, she often listened to the help of others that had experience and know-how. Ahsoka soon became adept in reverse grip dual wielding, and with her master's help, she adapted it to forms 2 and 4. Merging it with form 2 Makashi was by far the hardest, but after much dedication, Ahsoka managed to do it, though she couldn't use reverse grip while doing so. A few months after Ahsoka turned 12, her master took her to Shilly. Her purpose was for Ahsoka to take part in the tradition that many Zagrudis attempted to do, to kill an Aool alone. Aools were known to destroy entire villages, and were extremely good hunters, so the Zagrun hunting party was usually gathered to deal with them. The second option though, was an Aool hunt, where a single Zagrud went to kill the Aool. It was something that many aspiring Zagrudis attempted, but few succeeded in because of just how dangerous a single Aool was. If they managed it, then they could take its teeth and make headdress of them, like the one Master T wore. Ahsoka wasn't too nervous, until they got to an outlying village where Master T took her lightsabers, replacing them with a rudimentary knife, spear, and pack. To complete the Aool hunt by tradition, she would have to kill it the way the other two Zagrudis killed it. Without further explanation or prep, Ahsoka nervously set out the first thing the next morning, going southeast as directed by the village chief. Within half a day of walking, she found herself exiting the forest where their village called home and entering a large grassland. The reddish orange and white tulle grass scraped at her chest and legs as she walked through it. She couldn't help but laugh as she realized that her skin and stripes actually kind of blended in with it. After pausing and clearing for a break at midday, she continued. She didn't exactly know what she was looking for, just that an Aool had orange fur and was a formidable beast strong enough to threaten entire villages, so she tried to remain alert. However, as the day wore on, she struggled to do so. The heat made her sluggish, and the thought that this was her home world brought a sense of ease. The warning she found in the forest was the first thing she had told her something was off. Or perhaps it was her senses. Whatever told her, she tended to start anxiously scanning her surroundings, but she couldn't see anything. The tulle grass rustled in the wind, and the sun was starting to cast shadows from the forest nearby. Ahsoka froze. She didn't feel any wind, and the tulle grass around her was still, so why was it rustling in front of her? An orange that was lighter than the grass caught her attention, but as she blinked, the form that she had just become aware of was flying towards her. Ahsoka wanted to stand her ground, but instinct drove her and she threw herself to the side. Its claws through Carter's shirt, tearing it open. She didn't have time to think of what could happen if she was a second slower. Instead, she desperately looked for the wood spear amongst the dense grass, hating that she had dropped it in her frantic escape. Because of this, she narrowly missed the jaws of the Aool when it attacked again. It didn't miss its swipe this time though, swatting her with its paw and sending her sprawling away. Gasping for air and too scared to see if there was blood, she gave up on the spear and drew the knife which had miraculously stayed on her belt. She swung it wildly as the Aool approached, miraculously managing to draw some blood which caused her to create some distance. Ahsoka turned with it as it circled her. Knife fell out in front of her. Sounds started dull as her body heaved with a frantic breath. Her arms trembled in front of her as her vision began to darken at the edges. It only took her shaking arms lowering a fraction for the Aool to pounce again. She tried to move out of the way again, but it anticipated this. Fur and muscle slammed into her, stunning her and only regaining focus as drops of drool fell from the Aool's open mouth. A mouth that was directly above her head and full of sharp teeth. The Aool stared down at her, its snout close enough that she could reach up and touch it. Its hot breath slammed to her like waves, making it hard to breathe herself. It was then that she realized that the knife was no longer in her hand, and she was too scared to look away to find it. Instead, trembling, trying to keep still, she gingerly fell around her. Though her left arm was pinned on the Aool's paw, a paw that was also somehow on her waist, she had landed with her right arm sprawled above her head. As she fell around this arm, her hand brushed against something smooth. But before she could contemplate what it was, the Aool moved. So grabbed the object, only registering it was wood as she brought it forward as the Aool moved to bite her, its claws digging into her side and arm. The stick struck the Aool's neck, and, with it moving forward and her desperate use of the force, it sank deep into its flesh. A snarling whimper escaped as it thrashed backwards. So tried to keep hold of what she now realized was a spear that she had lost, but blood had already coated it, and it slipped from her grasp as the Aool whined and whipped its head. So instead, she scrambled back from the giant beast. This was pointless, as the Aool was only up for a moment more before it collapsed to the ground, its side only weakly rising once more before it went unnaturally still. The entire area seemed to become eerily quiet as she stared at the still form. As she stared at the life she just took. Ahsoka's breath was ragged as she stared at the corpse of the Aool. She might have continued to stare at it if it weren't for the noise behind her. She scrambled to her feet and spun around, only to find several other Degrudas approaching, with her master at the forefront. Relief flooded through her, but also confusion. Had they followed her? Had they watched her fight? They were soon by her side, and Master Yi gently placed her hand on Ahsoka's shoulder, praising and congratulating her on this accomplishment. Though the praise felt nice, it also stung. She didn't feel like she had been prepared for this fight in the slightest, and even when she was under the Aool, they hadn't come to help. Perhaps they had faith in her, but what would faith do if she had died? Master Yi always told her to trust in and rely on the Force. Is that what she had done? Trusted the Force? Could she rely on Master Yi if she was ever in danger, or would she leave her fate to the Force? She didn't have the time or energy to think about this as things quickly got busy. They brought the Aool back to the village on a makeshift cart where the Gruen villagers proceeded to start carving it up. Not having the stomach to watch, she went to wash off the dried blood from the Aool and have her wounds looked at. She was surprised to see that her wounds weren't too severe, only a single row of claw marks and a few puncture holes from the claws, though bruises could already be seen forming. Compared to her shirt, which was in tatters and soaked in blood, she fared surprisingly well. Afterwards, as part of the tradition, for slaying the Aool alone, an ornament headdress was made for her with some of its teeth. She was soon swept up in the festive spirit that ran deep into the night, and she momentarily forgot about the events that had transpired mere hours ago. When the next morning came though, Ahsoka's whole body was sore and ached, with the memories from the previous day vivid in her mind. The headdress of the Aool's teeth felt unnatural for her to wear, but she put it on anyway. If not for this, then what was the point of going through that? The village was still lively, and smiles were passing on everyone's face. Ahsoka replicated as best she could, but the uneasiness was still there. She and Master Yi left Shili that day in the late afternoon after a big farewell from the other Degrudas. Master Yi took them back to Coruscant, where they planned to stay so Ahsoka's battered body healed. Unfortunately, during this, Master Yi was given the mission by the High Council, and though Ahsoka wanted to accompany her, her master decided against bringing her. So, Ahsoka was left to wait out the temple. Instead of the boredom she feared though, within days of her master leaving, she found that a crowd had gathered at the base of the Jedi Temple. This fascinated her and she curiously asked about it. What she learned only filled her with longing and sadness. Apparently, the Jedi had accidentally taken in an infant without the mother's permission. Now, the mother wanted her daughter back, but the Jedi were refusing. As the protests continued at the base of the temple, Ahsoka constantly found herself wondering about her own mother. She wished her mother had loved her enough not to give her up, and was disappointed in the Jedi that they weren't allowing the child to be loved. Though she sometimes looked down at the crowd of people, and even managed to see the little girl that was in the crash, Ahsoka tried to separate herself from it. She focused on lightsaber training, even though her body still ached with every movement. As part of it, Ahsoka started learning how to wield a staff, believing it couldn't be much different from how one wields a spear. The archives also started attracting her attention, but mostly only the records on Degrudas and Shili. Over a month passed in which Ahsoka mostly left her own device inside the temple. Plo had made appearances, but he was also busy, and she had heard no word from her master. A few other Jedi took turns training her for the day, but the only noteworthy one she remembered was Master Fisto, who she enjoyed being with because of his carefree attitude and smile. This ended as Master Yi finally returned, and she took Ahsoka with her again. However, over the next year, similar instances kept on repeating. Master Yi devoted herself to Ahsoka when they were together, but she was left at the temple several more times, while Master Yi went on missions that she deemed weren't suitable for a Padawan. With her frequent stays in the temple, Ahsoka's bond with Master Yi remained shaky, but she got close with a fair number of other Jedi, though sadly none were fellow Padawans. Many happily helped her with lightsaber and staff training, as it happened the first time, and the person she now most often found herself with was Battlemaster Sindralik. He had a different view of what she should study from Master Yi. The Master Yi reasoned she might battle Sith, since she was the chosen one. Battlemaster Sindralik argued that she would more likely be facing blasters, something that Forms 2 and 4 were ill-suited for. Given her dual wielding, it could be done in theory, but he didn't like to rely on chance. So, when he had time for her, he focused on teaching her Form 3, a purely defensive form, as not only excellent against blasters, but also for holding her own against a superior lightsaber-wielding opponents. Over time, she learned more about all the other lightsaber forms as well. Most of the Jedi that helped train her taught her the lightsaber training techniques that they preferred. Though they also offered their help in her studies, she only occasionally accepted. This mostly because she disliked the philosophy that usually entailed. Rather, even though she had read almost everything about her people on the home planet, she still often went to the archives. Even though she quickly got bored, if she didn't want to read, Master Jocasta was always there and someone she could talk with. On her way there one day after some mundane solo lightsaber exercises, she took the shortcut through the lobby of the temple. The last thing she expected to see when she walked in though was a group of people that obviously weren't supposed to be there, running through it. Temple guards are on their heels, but are evidently trying to be non-lethal, all while the people threw stuff at the walls. Ahsoka panicked when these things started exploding. She dove behind a pillar, only to realize that, instead of actually exploding, they covered the walls with paint that formed images and words. Before she could fully look at what was now painted on the walls, a loud argument drew her attention. The ones arguing were a pair of Padawans that were in the entranceway and appearing to be directly in the way of the intruders. She immediately recognized Reva, the Mickey she had met during the Padawan trial. Before she knew what she was doing, Ahsoka was by their side as the more people approached. They were hesitantly blocking the entranceway, but the other Padawan was nervous at holding his lightsaber. Scared of it coming to that, she anxiously turned to Reva, asking how she felt about using the Force to push them away. A tight smile formed as she agreed, and on the count of 3, they both pushed out with the Force, launching all those in front of them off their feet. Regrettably, this also included temple guards. Unfortunately, everyone was back on their feet within moments, and they didn't even have time to process that several devices were now being hurled at them. Ahsoka tried to turn and cover her face, but the shockwave followed by a wall of paint hit them a moment later, and she was thankful that she had closed her eyes in time. She didn't even have time to shout now that there was drying paint caked onto her before the mob was shoving past them. The other Padawan was already taking care of her on the other side of the entranceway, and Reva pulled onto the other side, out of the way of the people. The intruders thankfully didn't appear to be interested in them, so they all seemed to silently agree to stay put. A calm voice echoed clear in the room a moment later, and Ahsoka immediately recognized Plo. He told the people to stop and surrender themselves, and surprisingly they complied. She realized that he must have been using mind tricks on them, as she felt compelled to join them. 7 more temple guards arrived to fully attain the group. As they were taken away, Plo and another Jedi came to them. They made sure they were alright before thanking and praising them for their brave actions. Plo patted her shoulder before they excused themselves, suggesting they go wash up. The sticky paint had by now dried on their clothes and skin, and the boy was already scurrying away. Reva and Ahsoka followed him, but before parting, agreed to meet up afterwards. Washing the paint off took longer than Ahsoka would have liked, especially having to scrub her munch holes and washing a cool headdress. She still fervently finished and rushed to the mess hall where they agreed to meet up. Reva was already there, and they talked while they ate an early lunch, catching up for the past couple of years. They hadn't been able to get too close before, but Ahsoka was excited at the chance of now becoming friends. Though Ahsoka now actually wanted to be left at the temple for the chance that Reva was also there, within a day meeting again, Master Yi returned and took Ahsoka with her. She did not leave Ahsoka temple again for the next few months, and Ahsoka grew worried as she realized how bad the situation in the galaxy had deteriorated in such a short time. The seeming calm just 2 years ago had been replaced with chaos and strife, though it hadn't been entirely peaceful then either. Master Yi made sure that Ahsoka knew what was happening throughout, and constantly immersed her in whatever they're doing, whether it was diplomatic negotiations or humanitarian aid. This often got in the way of her training, and Master Yi started focusing more on politics and theology, sacrificing lightsaber training or other studies. The Master Yi now freely took her to almost any world, they mostly only went if it was in political turmoil or after a disaster. Coincidentally, with their diplomatic efforts, this also meant that they unfortunately spent a lot of time on Coruscant as well. The Master Yi sometimes went to these meetings alone. She often tried to take Ahsoka with, intending for her to observe and learn. Ahsoka soon became familiar with several senators and officials, but the man she most often saw was Chancellor Palpatine. Though she was supposed to just be an observer, he frequently approached her. He was polite to her, and she was polite back, but she was always unnerved how interested he seemed to be in her life. She did enjoy talking about herself, and the attention that following Master Yi brought though. Having the chance to talk with a lot of different people was something that she often looked forward to, but the frequent interest of Chancellor Palpatine became just another reason why she didn't like staying on Coruscant. Whenever she was with him, his presence always felt off and unnatural. It was something that she had never felt before, so she didn't know what to make of it. As they were finally sent out again, she was thrilled to leave Coruscant, but it was short-lived. Before they could even arrive at their intended destination, they were recalled back to the Jedi Temple. Just after they had left, there had been an attempted assassination against a prominent senator, and the Jedi Council was nervous as to what it could mean. Ahsoka assisted where she could as Master T conducted her own investigation into the incident. They interpreted again after only a few days of this, with Master Windu summoned Master T and every other High Council member in the temple. Ahsoka stayed by Master side as Master Windu quickly filled them in. During a separate investigation done by a Jedi Knight, in which both a clone and droid armor were discovered, the Knight had just been captured by Count Dooku on Geonosis. His execution was already planned, and they needed to rescue him. Everyone obeyed Master Windu, so he summoned every available Jedi Master Knight in the temple, and near the Arcanus sector. Though several Jedi opted to leave their Padawans at the temple, many others brought theirs. Master T permitted Ahsoka to come as well. One of the several other Padawans coming besides her was Anakin, the captured Knight's apprentice. Ahsoka hadn't interacted with him since she first met him, but he still acknowledged her when he saw that she was coming. Before they left, Master T told her to bring and wear a Jedi robe. For the most part, Master T had permitted her to wear what she felt like, as long as it was modest. She had only worn the robes to try them on, but now she donned the heavy garments. Ahsoka and her master used one of the many shuttles along with the majority of the Jedi, while a few others flew the Jedi starfighters. When they got to Geonosis, she stayed closer to her master as they landed and infiltrated the arena, using mind tricks to get past a few Geonosian guards. They managed to get in without raising an alarm, and Master T led her to the stands to wait. Geonosians surrounded them, and their appearance quickly began to creep Ahsoka out. Distracted as they waited, she turned her attention to the Jedi that they were here to rescue. He was chained to a pillar in the center of the arena, though he didn't appear all that worried, even as a giant green insect-looking thing with 6 legs was guiding to the arena. By the time it was guided closest to the pillars in the center, everyone rolled up into a frenzy by the Geonosian guards. With the only seeming path forward, it attacked the Jedi. Ahsoka tensed, but couldn't help but get caught up in the ensuing scuffle. The Jedi almost immediately got free thanks to the giant bug breaking the chain, and from there, he was able to avoid it. He managed to get a spear from one of the guards, which he used to try and fight the bug, but that seemed to make it angrier. He then stole him out from another Geonosian guard, who was quickly killed by the bug. It was funny to see the Geonosians being made a mockery of by the Knight. The bug had only thus far killed them and damaged the arena, instead of its intended victim. Perhaps it was for this reason that the remaining guards crawled the bug back towards the tunnel it came out of. At the same time, several things rolled into the arena surrounding the Knight. It was only then that she looked who was giving the orders. Up on a pavilion above the rest of the stand stood several individuals, one of which was someone who both Master T and Plo had told her about. Though she had only seen a hologram of his younger self, the face was unmistakable. Former Jedi Count Dooku. Master Windu appeared behind him a moment later, lightsaber ignited. This was the signal, and she watched 100 lightsabers ignite throughout the stands. Geonosians in the stands took to the sky, swarming like a disturbed insect nest. Banning her robe, Ahsoka ignited both her lightsabers as well, just as several droids came shamming out of the tunnels into the stands. She helped her master cut these down, watching her back while she faced the brunt of the Force. Ahsoka stayed close to Master T as she jumped into the arena, joining the desperate battle that had started there. They unfortunately quickly got separated, and it filled Ahsoka with apprehension. She tried to follow her master's example and use Form 2, but there were too many blast bolts, so instead she quickly began using Form 3. With fear building, she frantically deflected blast bolts away from her, not caring enough to direct them at an enemy, and trying to ignore the burns from the blast bolts that she felt to deflect, which thankfully only grazed her. When her foot hit something soft though, she faltered. Looking down, she saw the body of a human. She remembered that face. They had taken the same shuttle to get here. Now, his open eyes were lifeless, and his body was riddled with blaster marks. Blast bolts still continued to fly around her, and only instinct saved one from directly hitting her. With trembling hands, she resumed her defense, trying not to notice the death that she now realized littered the floor. However, now that she was aware, it was all she could see. Their pain and fear were now all she could feel in the Force before even that was snuffed out. Begging for her emotions to go numb, she soon got herself in the middle of a group of Jedi, the only ones left standing that she could see. The chaotic fighting abruptly stopped then, and she followed the gaze of the rest of the Jedi to the pavilion that Count Dooku still stood on. He started by praising their efforts, but she looked away as she saw several Jedi being led to the group. She immediately recognized Plo amongst them, and though he flinched when he saw her, He also gently nodded. Count Dooku continued, telling them to surrender and live, but Master Windu refused. With an apology from Count Dooku, the droids that had surrounded them raised their blasters again, waiting for the command to fire. The standoff only lasted a moment before noise and shadows moved over the arena. Looking up, Ahsoka saw several ships that she didn't recognize descend into the arena and began firing at the droids. The droids immediately began firing as well, both back at the ships and at the Jedi. Some of the ships descended, hovering just above the ground and creating a perimeter around the group of Jedi while the rest swept through the arena, carving swaths into the droids. Several beings of white armor jumped out of the hovering ships and began firing back at the droids with long blasters. Without a command, the surviving Jedi began jumping onto the ships as the white armor-clad soldiers covered them. Ahsoka followed, fighting to not look back at the bodies that were being left behind. Because she was too scared to completely stop defending, she was one of the last to get to the shuttles. Just as she was about to jump into one, a soldier behind her fell. However, she could sense that he was still alive. Without thinking, she turned and went to him, igniting her lightsabers on the way. Shadows on the Jedi already on the shuttle followed her, but she was already by his side and using the force to drag him to the shuttle. Another soldier came to her and helped her get him on before they quickly rose into the air. As they flew, she stayed crouched by the injured soldier, not knowing what to do. She heard Grandmaster Yoda speak, and she only realized then who else was on the shuttle with her. Explosions shook the shuttle as they were fired at, and a nearby shuttle had promptly exploded, disappearing out of sight as it fell to the ground in a ball of flame. Master Windu quickly ordered the pilot to land, and he complied. It was only then that Ahsoka looked out the open doors. Massive ships were below them with small white dots swarming around, and more shuttles ferrying soldiers and large legged vehicles onto the ground. In front of them in the distance was a giant rock structure, with what seemed like an endless wave of forms coming from it. As they got closer, she realized that the dots below them were more soldiers, and the ones approaching were droids. However, the soldiers were walking straight towards the droids over the vast flat terrain. As they landed, all the Jedi jumped out besides Grandmaster Yoda, and she hesitantly followed them. A soldier was waiting for them and told Master Windu that he was awaiting his orders. As he waved his arm, Ahsoka impulsively told him to wait. She immediately regretted this, but she felt that this was wrong. Though she didn't know much about war, while studying her own planet and species, she had inadvertently read about the previous battles that had taken place there. Not only that, but she had also learned from her experience fighting the Aool. From what she understood, one should use the terrain to their advantage when fighting. After seeing how the Jedi had fared on even ground in the arena, she had little hope for these soldiers. Ahsoka hesitantly told this Master Windu. She expected a reprimand, but instead Master Windu looked conflicted before he looked towards the approaching horde of droids. Turning back to her, he asked what she would do then. Anxiously filling with her lightsabers, she told him that she didn't know, but quickly added that perhaps the soldiers did. They seemed well trained after all. Master Windu turned to the soldiers that had spoken to him, asking for his opinion. After a pause, he gave a rough plan of what he would do, which involved getting off this open plain and sending the commanders behind the lines. Master Windu told him to follow it, and for the rest of the soldiers to follow their commander as well, but to not hesitate to ask the Jedi if they needed help. He then went and spoke with the Jedi that had been on the same shuttle. They started walking back to the shuttle that was still hovering with Grandmaster Yoda on, but Master Windu came to her, thanking her for her insight and courage. He told her to stay with him till she was able to reunite with her master. Relief momentarily overtook the shock and fear that were weighing heavily on her. She stayed a step behind him as they were transported to the forward command center. Though most of the surviving Jedi wins the battle again, whether it was in the skies or on the ground, Ahsoka stayed out of the action for the duration of the fighting. Though the heat was sweltering and her wounds stung, she couldn't stay still after treating her wounds. She was either observing from one of the command centers, or doing what she could for the wound that came back. It was there she learned that these soldiers were part of the clone army she had heard about, even though their presence in the Force all varied. She was in the command center at the end of the day when the news came in that all remaining resistance was destroyed, though unfortunately, Count Dooku and a vast number of droids had been able to escape. The price for this victory had been awful. Almost 100 Jedi and over 2,000 clones are now dead. The constant death had been eating away at her all day, and she was struggling to accept it. She was finally reunited with her master as things were being wrapped up, and though Master Lee seemed happy to see her, Ahsoka was uneasy. She could reason with how they're separating the arena, but why had she not come looking for her sooner? Only 3 of the Padawans that had come are still alive. Had she not worried if she was one of the fallen? Did she really leave her fate to the Force again? The majority of the Jedi, including Master T and Ahsoka, went back to course once Geonosis was secured. Once there, Her master, along with the rest of the Jedi High Council, were in constant meetings with the Republic officials. Though she didn't know the details, it was obvious it was about the war that somehow started on Geonosis. There seemed to be constant news of droid invasions, or planets and systems ceding from the Republic and joining what came to be known as a Confederacy of Independent Systems. However, even though her master was too busy to sleep, there was nothing for Ahsoka to do. She hated inaction, but it was especially bad this time. It left her with too much time to think about what she had miraculously survived on Geonosis. What she had survived while countless others did not. One massive funeral service had taken place a few days after for all the fallen Jedi. Most of the remains had been cremated, though a few had been placed in caskets. Their final resting place is now under the Jedi Temple, and their lightsabers are all that were left to remember them. She fortunately hadn't known any of them well. The one she had known best was Master Trevor, probably just from the times he had conversed with her master. However, the face she couldn't get out of her head was that of the human Jedi. She had flown the same shuttle as him, seen him alive, then had seen him dead. He was the only one of the deceased she had seen up close, and she couldn't forget his lifeless eyes. Ahsoka pretended that this didn't affect her and just focused on her training. Since Master T and Plo, along with the rest of the High Council, were busy, and Batmaster Jolly was focused on the Jedi Temple security, Ahsoka had to mainly train alone. She understood that her master had responsibilities, but it felt like she had recently spent more time away from her master than by her side. After everything that happened over the past year, her bond with Master T was filled with doubt and uncertainty. Ahsoka didn't tell anyone this or let it show. Her master's reasoning and logic were sound, so it was only her feelings getting in the way, and a Jedi shouldn't let their emotions control them. Within a month, the meeting seemed to end, and Ahsoka returned to her master's side. Though the Chancellor and many others wanted the Jedi to lead the newly emerged clone army, because they didn't know how, the Jedi Council had instead agreed upon being advisors. Master T took Ahsoka with her when she was immediately sent to Kamino to learn more about the clone army. Once there, Ahsoka found it fascinating, albeit a bit disturbing how the clones were created, raised, and trained. The Kaminoans were practically emotionless in their operations, and the facility was unnervingly clean and white. She didn't particularly care to meet any of the Kaminoans, and her master seemed to sense her restlessness. So after the preliminary introductions and tour, Master T let her go mingle amongst the clones. The clones around Kamino were of varying ages, from toddlers to grown men, and how they trained in combat caught her interest. She had seen it demonstrated in action after all. They only stayed on Kamino for a day and a half before leaving to meet up with a clone unit that was fighting on Daegu. That battle was Ahsoka's first real taste of actual combat, as she followed her master into the fray. Though they were technically advisors and couldn't command the clones, the High Council had stressed that they shouldn't hesitate to instead help them. On Daegu, this is exactly what Master T did. Ahsoka had to suppress her anxiety and fear at the prospect of charging droids. Petronarchy Arena was so recent and vivid in her mind, but she managed. Within a few days, they successfully liberated Daegu from the Separatists. Afterwards, she learned that the clones actually looked up to her and her master. They admired their ability to face oncoming fire and walk through it, though they still didn't understand why they didn't wear armor. She also learned that just as the clones on Kamino were referred to by numbers, these ones were too. It unnerved her, and she hated calling them by a number, so she casually tried to suggest names that they could use. They told her they would think about it, but she didn't hear their decision. First thing the next morning, she and Master T were sent to another clone unit. They spent the next year doing just that, moving between clone units, and Ahsoka became familiar with many of them. The clones were able to successfully fight against a massive droid army, but there is a common thing every clone commander in general mentioned. The droid army vastly outnumbered them, so why had they overwhelmed them? Why were they instead engaging minimal forces in long battles of attrition, or abandoning units that were reinforcing them? Because of the Battle of Geonosis, Ahsoka understood what they were talking about. Even the Jedi could be overwhelmed by numbers, and Count Dooku had seen that. So why wasn't he using that tactic against the clones? Still, nobody knew the reason, so they just focused on the task at hand. The war was going well anyway, so why would someone want to jinx it? Though there are many slogs that are still ongoing, most of the battles are quick affairs that usually result in a Republic victory, with thankfully limited clone fatalities. The worst defeats for the Republic came at the hands of a lightsaber-wielding cyborg creature known as General Grievous, and a Sith whose name was Ventress. Whenever they appeared, teams of Jedi were sent out to confront them. Occasionally, Master Yi was part of it, but she never brought Ahsoka along. When this happened, she was usually left with the clone unit or in the temple on Coruscant. Whether Master Yi was part of the teams or not, Ahsoka also sometimes went on missions without her. At first, she feared these, but eventually she became comfortable fighting alone alongside the clones, especially since she didn't have to worry about advising them. Master Yi rarely did as well. They mostly let the clones do their thing, while they assisted them where needed. The only thing that Master Yi advised clones about was political targets, avoiding unnecessary damage or civilian casualties. If the clone unit she was with had downtime, Ahsoka usually talked with his leaders, asking them to teach her about leadership, combat, and tactics. Though the Jedi weren't really supposed to be taking part in combat because the Vices didn't do that, almost all the Jedi usually accompany the clones into battle. They often were either the spirit of the attack, a diversion, or an infiltration party that sabotaged the droid staging area. Ambushes were also an occasional occurrence when they were traveling between destinations. Though Ahsoka did enjoy being on lush planet surface, during battle, she always preferred flying her starfighter. Flying it, she felt freer and safer than she ever had, all while demonstrating her innate ability to fly. Whenever she got a chance, which was usually offered because of her talent, she took it. On her own downtime, she did question why the Jedi were involved in this war though. The Jedi were peacekeepers, and though it could be argued they still were, since they were only technically advising, she and her master were again doing more fighting than advising. Several Jedi had also already lost their lives over the past year of fighting as well. None of it made sense to her, but she was too scared to speak up. Though she had impulsively spoken her mind in Master Windu, and it had gone well, she didn't want to try again. Though combat unsettled her, she was fine being away from the politics that had engulfed her life before this. Being a High Council member's Padawan though, meant politics was still something that she had to deal with. Most of the advisors' roles they were sent to do had political support, or the planet was of political interest. It was tolerable since they rarely spent hours in meetings like they had before on Coruscant. Instead, Master Yi usually was informed remotely after the debates. During times they did go back to Coruscant and had to meet with political officials, Chancellor Palpatine was always there. Though he still felt off, she had gotten used to him by now, along with his interest in her. In fact, she had started to enjoy sharing her recent activities with him, while her master talked with officials. This all soon became a comfortable routine for Ahsoka. So, it wasn't at all unusual when Chancellor Palpatine approached her one morning. When he said he wanted to talk with her away from prying eyes, she didn't even argue as he gathered her to his office and showed her around. He pointed out artifacts that were scattered around his office and told her their origin, but Ahsoka started to get a sinking feeling. Most of the artifacts were somehow related to the Sith. Why did he have them? She couldn't bring herself to ask this or anything else, scared of the answer or the potential of losing her conversation partner. However, perhaps taking her silence as an interest, he moved away from the artifacts and started talking just about the Sith and their abilities. Everything she had told him, her fears, worries, and anxiety she felt, he now told her Sith ways to use those emotions, or to overcome them. Ahsoka suddenly remembered what Anakin told her just months ago. He had started out on one of the rare instances she was in the temple. He told her that Chancellor Palpatine had once tried befriending him when he was younger, but then the Chancellor suddenly started ignoring him like nothing had happened. Anakin hadn't thought much of it until he heard from his former master that Chancellor Palpatine was now interested in and trying to get close with Ahsoka. She had proceeded to ignore what he had said then, perhaps feeling jealous that he had also received similar attention from Chancellor Palpatine, but now his words wouldn't leave her. Mulling over what he said and what Chancellor Palpatine was currently saying, she talked just enough to feign interest before their conversation inevitably had to end. On her way back to the Jedi Temple, she contemplated what to do. Should she tell someone that he sounded like a Sith, or should she keep quiet and stick to her stable life? When she was almost back to her room, she literally ran to a group of younglings that were playing in the hall. They apologized before they quickly scattered, but it was enough. Turning around, she went in search of her master. She found Master Yi conversing with Master Windu, and though hesitantly, she confided in both of them about what Anakin had told her, how Chancellor Palpatine had been treating her, and what he had just told her. They both confirmed they had also been suspicious of Chancellor Palpatine with his actions first towards Anakin, and then her. However, With what he had just told her, Master Windu believed that this just confirmed that he was the Sith Lord they were looking for, and it was time to act. He started rounding up a strike team, and miraculously, he permitted Ahsoka to be part of it upon her request. They used a single shuttle to get to the executive building, where they went to the Chancellor's office. When they walked through the door, Chancellor Palpatine was alone, sitting behind his desk and gazing out at the galactic city skyline. Master Windu didn't hesitate in igniting his lightsaber and telling him to surrender himself. Chancellor Palpatine just chuckled, telling him that there was nothing they could do. Chancellor Palpatine was then flying towards them, and Ahsoka registered the surge of the Force too late. Their distance to each other remained the same as she was thrown back before her senses vanished as she smacked into the wall head first. Pain lanced its way through her. The sharp pain was the only thing that was there for a moment, until it faded to the throb. When it did, her sight was the first thing that came back, but as her vision cleared, she saw bodies everywhere. Slain Jedi littered the room, but there was thankfully still a fight taking place. Chancellor Palpatine's back was to her as he fought the remaining Jedi, including Master Windu. At that moment, she felt compelled to act. Doubt filled her, making her shake. She found one of her lightsabers, but she smothered with every emotion she was currently feeling, before gingerly standing and creeping forward. Having to fight alongside the clones, she had learned where the organs were in a human body and hoped to save a clone's life one day. Now, she was planning to use that knowledge to try and take one. Having gone close enough to the fight that seemed to have turned into a battle of wills, she ignited a lightsaber and surged forward, thrusting her lightsaber into the back of Chancellor Palpatine. A guttural noise escaped them as she quickly pulled out her lightsaber and retreated, unsure if her aim was true. However, he promptly collapsed to the ground, not even a breath escaping him as his body hit the floor. His head was slightly turned, making one of his eyes slightly visible, and it was how she confirmed that he was dead. She had seen too many lifeless eyes not to know what they looked like. A firm hand on her shoulder was the only thing that stopped her from looking at the body, and she looked up to see her master. A tight smile was on her face, but she didn't say anything to Ahsoka. Somberly but quickly, they tended to the slain Jedi in Chancellor Palpatine's body. As they started to leave the office, they found clones in the hallway running towards them. The leading Jedi went to greet them, but without hesitation the clones were firing at them. The first two Jedi didn't have time to ignite the lightsabers before their bodies were riddled with blaster bolts, but the rest of the Jedi ignited theirs and started defending themselves. Instead of deflecting shots back at the clones like the other Jedi, Ahsoka deflected the shots into the walls. She couldn't understand why they were attacking them, but she didn't want to kill the men she had become so familiar with. With the clones attacking them, the plans apparently changed. They left the slain Jedi behind, only bringing the lightsabers and Chancellor Palpatine's body. They fought their way back to the shuttle where they quickly boarded and took off. An exclamation came from the pilot a moment later, and everyone shrugged to look at what he had seen. When Ahsoka finally caught a glimpse, the whispers on the other Jedi had already told her. The Jedi temple was on fire with black smoke billowing from it. The temple was under attack. The pilot skillfully but quickly got them into the temple hangars, where the interrupted skirmish was taking place between a unit of clones and several of the temple guards with a few of the Jedi. The surviving members of the Jedi strike team immediately threw themselves at the clones into the temple's defense. The battle to defend the temple lasted for several days, during which an investigation began as to why the clones turned against them, along with talks with the Senate. Though Ahsoka didn't know everything that was said, she knew that the Senate was furious that the Jedi had killed Chancellor Palpatine, and many thought the clones' turn against him was justified. She didn't have the time or energy to think about any of this, as she and the rest of the able-bodied Jedi were constantly fighting new clone reinforcements that came to try and take the temple. They were ordered simply to subdue the clones if possible, but many Jedi just didn't care to, killing them without a second thought. Ahsoka happily followed the orders, but it was difficult, and she found herself in many precarious situations. It wasn't for a few more days that Ahsoka heard the reason the clones had turned against them. Each clone was created with something in their head that forced them to follow orders, regardless of their will or emotions, and they had been ordered to kill the Jedi by Chancellor Palpatine. The Jedi Council was working on getting this order rescinded with a new temporary Chancellor, and though many in the Republic didn't want this to happen, it eventually did. The only reason for this was because, with the clones focusing their efforts on killing Jedi, the Separatists are pushing the attack and making rapid progress. There's the catch to this agreement though, one that Ahsoka only learned as it took place. One the compromise reached in return for rescinding the order was that the Jedi who had landed the killing blow to Chancellor Palpatine, the one that was credited with killing him, would be arrested. This was explained to Ahsoka as non-clone Republic units arrived in the temple to arrest her. She was too shocked to argue or resist, as even her master passively watched her being led out of the temple in forced restraints. As weeks passed though, she had nothing to do but process this. Ahsoka felt like the air had been knocked out of her. Why had the council, why had her master so readily agreed to this? Any one of them could have taken the fall. It would have been believable. Why had they given her over? She was the chosen one. Was that why? Had the council deemed that she was no longer useful now that she had fulfilled the prophecy by killing the Sith Lord? She knew that she was overthinking everything, but as the days passed, days that could only be distinguished by when her meals were brought, her theories and fears seemed all the more true. Over time, Ahsoka saw more and more clones amongst the guards. Though many seemed to ignore her or even hostile, there were a few that were nice. These clones were the only ones that talked to her, and they kept her up to date on the events happening outside. The Separatists had seen stunning success initially during the confusion, but the Republic was able to halt their advance. This was soon followed by several Jedi strike teams being sent out to specifically hunting either kill or capture the leaders of the CIS, including the military leaders. Ventress and Grievous had already been killed along with several others, with many more captured. Many of the mercenary generals also had left as soon as they realized that they were also targets of these Jedi strike teams. Count Dooku remained elusive for some time, but around in the upper levels of CIS were eliminated, and the collective movement crumbled. Many worlds and systems took this chance to sign a peace with the Republic, while another faction inside the CIS was also trying to broker a larger peace that would leave them independent. Then, finally, a Jedi strike team was able to catch up to and capture Count Dooku. This almost immediately led to a ceasefire between the Republic and the CIS. Within a week after this, Ahsoka was finally released from prison. It was only because of Count Dooku's testimony and the evidence found that showed that Chancellor Palpatine was behind the war and that Count Dooku was following his every order. However, even after being released and her things returned to her, no Jedi came for her. In the end, she had to accept the right offered to her by a few clones. Arriving at the temple, she learned that most of the High Council was with the new Chancellor, discussing the fate of the Jedi Order. The only Jedi that welcomed her were Anakin and Reva, the latter of which now being a knight. Having already put on her a cool headdress and her Padawan braid, which had been taken from her when she was locked up, as soon as she got to her room, she promptly removed them again. Master Yi didn't return to the temple until after the sun had set, and that was with the entire High Council. They made a show of praising and thanking her, even saying that they believed this had been her great trial, and she was now ready to become a knight. None of this was what she wanted to hear. None of this was an apology. None of them asked if she was alright. Ignoring the rest of the council, she turned to her master and asked if she had ever thought of protecting her when she had been dragged out of the temple like a criminal, when she had been confined to a plain white room for months. Master Yi appeared taken back, but quickly responded that of course she had, and had worried about her the whole time. Though she exuded tenderness, Ahsoka had known her long enough to see beyond it. There was no emotion to her words. Trembling, Ahsoka gently grabbed Master Yi's hand and placed her Padawan braid and a cool headdress in it. She whispered a single goodbye before she turned and walked out of the temple. Plo caught up to her before she could reach the stairs. Without turning, she bluntly told him that she wasn't changing her mind. He told her he understood and apologized for failing to protect her. She remained silent, so he continued, speaking of her mother. He told her her name, what village she was in, and his coordinates. When he told her that he was telling her this because her mother had made him promise to do so, she couldn't hold back her tears. He gave her a short hug and sipped her bag of credits and, after murmuring a final apology, he quietly faded back into the darkness. Ahsoka wasted no time getting a fight to Chili. Once there, using both the coordinates from Plo and the village name, she searched for the village. It took days as, without her own transportation, she had to make the trek on foot. However, soon, a village appeared amidst a dense forest. After she verified it was the one she was looking for, she inquired about her mother. This was interrupted when someone hesitantly called her name. Turning, she saw an older female Chikuta that bore a striking resemblance to her. Instinctively, she knew this was her mother, and tears flowed free down both her cheeks as they closed the distance and locked in an embrace.